So I've been told that I'm an incredibly intuitive person. I thought it was a little bit vague and a little bit like naff. And I was like, what is this intuition about?
Today's guest is a CEO, moderator, storyteller, and an aspiring intuition PhD. Livia Bernardini is a CEO of Future Platforms, a digital product company trusted by brands like BT and McKinsey.
You've worked in Japan, Canada, the UK. How has your global career shaped your leadership style?
Yes, there is a brilliant article for those who are interested about how living abroad makes you know yourself better, which in return shapes better career decisions.
In this episode, we unpack how Livia juggles multiple identities, what she's learned from building across industries and countries, and how storytelling, culture, and product strategy all connect at the leadership level.
Genuine listening skills are embedded in my thirst for knowledge and curiosity. So I couldn't be as curious as I am if I didn't learn how to listen carefully to what gets said, and most importantly, to what doesn't get said.
Hey everyone, today's guest is a CEO, moderator, storyteller, and an aspiring intuition PhD. Livia Bernardini is the CEO of Future Platforms, a digital product company trusted by brands like BT and McKinsey. She's also a high-demand event moderator, known for creating high-value panels and coaching speakers to deliver real insights. And when she's not leading teams or hosting stages, she's looking at crafting her own intuition course. In this episode, we unpack how Livia juggles multiple identities, what she's learned from building across industries and countries, and how storytelling, culture, and product strategy all connect at the leadership level. Livia, it's great to have you here today.
Thank you for inviting me, Seema.
Fantastic. Livia, you've worked in Japan, Canada, the UK. How has your global career shaped your leadership style? Talk to me about that.
Yes, there is a brilliant article for those who are interested about how living abroad makes you know yourself better, which in return shapes better career decisions. I believe it's a piece by Harvard's Business Reviews. I will try to find more direct references, and perhaps we can add it to the comment of the podcast when we finish. But it's there is something around living somewhere else which makes you question your own values and which one of those values you want to retain because they're quite you versus which other values to perhaps borrow or lean from into the culture that it's giving you the possibility to experience something that you weren't familiar with. So for me, I was born in Italy, grew up in Italy till I was 16, and then I had a very good chance to go to Paris for a while, which wasn't that different, to be honest, than being in Italy. The real step change happened in Australia. So I spent a couple of years in Australia, and I guess it was quite startling, the difference between old countries, so to speak, and newer countries. And I think Australia gave me many abilities, like, for example, the ability of leaving the house without makeup, or paying attention to other aspects of life that perhaps in between Rome and Paris wasn't quite possible to focus on as a default. And then, of course, I worked in Japan and Hong Kong for a couple of years, short of 2 years between the two countries, which again was an incredibly fascinating experience. And I guess leaders need to really become receptive and be able to see forward. I think the trait of a good leader is anticipating change, anticipating what may happen in markets, in particular situations. And the more you're attuned to listening to different cultures and different cultural value set, the harder it would be for you to be blindsided.
How has Japan and Canada actually shaped or changed your value, and at what level?
So Japan, for me, it's a brilliant mixture of tradition and values that perhaps belong to a classically older cultures and a blend in a push of wanting to modernize itself and moving forward, because perhaps Japan as a country saw its height in the industry in the 80s and 90s. So now perhaps they're seeking ways of modernizing themselves, transforming to be competitive in a market that kind of demands a little bit more globalization and a global output. But I think like what Japan constantly gives me a chance to ponder and reflect is the balance between tradition and modernity and new ways of doing things and breaking things, break everything and create something brand new. There aren't that many countries, in my view, like Japan, that have that perfect balance and dichotomy between tradition and innovation.
Understood. And you describe yourself as too brand for tech and too tech for brand. How has that mix worked to your advantage?
I'm not sure it's an advantage. I'm sure it has been to a lot of teams, that's for sure. it has been annoying to teams, partners, and clients alike because I'm constantly poking. Although I'm not a poker as a style of person, I'm more of an enabler. I'm a very caring person. So for me, it's like all about pragmatic progress. However, I think in most tech environments, I always been nagging about the lack of brand purpose and perhaps sometimes clarity on the North Star. Was perhaps I always spot if there is a little bit of customer value proposition missing, misalignment with the brand. In tech environments, usually you have product proficiency, yet sometimes the key features, the way those key feature stories are told, are not perhaps pointy enough or distinctive enough because the brand is lagging behind a little or is not getting expressed 360 in its maximum way. So I have this ability of spotting those gaps and become quite finicky around trying to elevate the product work and to make it a little bit pointier. And equally, I am a big fan and passionate about brand work. I've been doing global brand positionings and brilliant project for some of the most illustrious organization, from Yamaha Music Corporation to British Telecom, to your point, and other big brands. Yet what I find that often is missing is the link between great brand work and great brand positioning and effective use of data when it comes down to bottom up. So crafting it into sales funnels and experiences that really convert in the nitty gritty details that only great products can deliver for you. So doesn't matter which team you put me into, I'm gonna be able to be a little bit annoying to either side, or a great translator, translating across languages and making them align on a single vision.
Love it. And you said you like to find out these gaps, and you're kind of nagging in terms of across both teams. And if I use the right adjective out there, give me an example of how you've actually got that to life and how the brand has, or your client, a customer, has actually benefited and moved forward on that.
Yes, it's an interesting question because I think it depends. There are so many different examples, and I think there are so many different examples that manifest in complete different ways because of the type of organization. I think one particular example, I think it was for me in a job that we did some time ago, and it was part of the EE new big brand relaunch that we did across the UK. The tech team at BT were incredibly strong and are incredibly strong. So incredibly strong set of developers and technical architect and QA analyst and all of that. Yeah, I think there was a little bit of a challenge in translating the brand vision into what the digital product should have performed as and should have been looking like, it should have been behaving like. So it felt much more tense than it needed to be. And everything that was needed was simply clearer information given in a language that was understood to the digital team that in fact perhaps needed a little bit of support on the front end on the digital product strategy applied rather than actually any tech work that they were absolutely brilliant at. And I think like being able to shape that bridge and create that connecting the dots in languages that made sense to each of the teams, including my own team internally, Simak. I have to be honest with you. Like, I think at the time I had a leader that was an absolute phenomenon at brand work. Perhaps he had a chance to dirty his hands a little bit less on the finicky details of product development. So I had to convince this strong leader to integrate our own resources with the right digital thinkers. And again, you need to really align personalities and visions and, create those what's in it for me promises so that each of the teams feels that they are aligned onto something that will be valuable for them and that they will be prized and proud of. And I think by just having this very rich translating job and being able to provide the assets at key point when they were required, we created some interfaces that won Transform Awards for 2005 that performed incredibly well. They were full of haptics and fantastic features that were very much brand-led. And won some awards even in the loyalty space for an app that was very much around the connectivity space, which isn't notoriously one of the easiest one to create loyalty for.
Got it. And you're the CEO of Future, right? Talk to me, what does that do and who are your ideal clients at that level?
My ideal clients, yes, of course. I would say 3 characteristics, my ideal clients. First of all, ambitious people, nice people, and people that will have a creative problem solver attitude so that we can move things along in the most constructive way that is also very sustainable for all parties involved.
Got it. And for everyone listening, what does Future Platforms do actually?
Yes, of course. Future Platform is an incredibly, I would say, premium to some extent, digital product development agency. So we service our clients into four areas. So the first one is the higher level strategy, which comes to customer value proposition all the way down into product vision roadmap. They
Right.
often are midterm, which we prefer to kind of have a look at what the midterm brings to us and what we could be doing in that space. Then secondly, we help designing on both sides, the technical designing element of it, but also the interface front-end design of our digital experiences. And thirdly, we implement so we can build the role for you.
Right.
And thirdly, we do go-to-market strategy and anything to do with maintenance support. We help companies strengthening their internal teams if they want to take on the maintenance of products internally. Equally, we're very good at being on demand, as and when a company perhaps decides to keep internal resources at a more contained level and use us on and off as there is more work and the demand of digital platforms is ramping up. The only thing that we don't do so you can pick and choose which one you need, and that's what we've been incredibly good for. We've been incredibly modular in the way we serve clients' needs because every organization is different. It's at a different stage of growth. So it's about being useful and supporting and complementing teams when necessary. The only thing we wouldn't support as a standalone feature of the one that I've mentioned is the go-to-market strategy part, because we purely do go-to-market to de-risk product development, MVP. So MVP and minimum lovable product. We believe that if you do the go-to-market at the same time, you got a much clearer understanding of which audiences you're building for and which are the features that would be more appropriate given the channels that you might want to launch with first, the countries that you want to launch with first. So our go-to-market is very much in service on product development and the risk in that very first couple of pilots.
Got it. And you said you're very modular, so a client can actually decide how many people he wants, etc. Now, you had also mentioned that you can scale up to about 2,000 people using nearshore partnerships. How does that operational model work actually?
Yes, thank you for asking, Simak. I think clients don't quite, so a little correction. So I'm not a fan of client choosing necessarily how many people they want to use.
Okay.
So for me, it's more about client completely choosing what they need where in a way that it's 80% completely mix and match. There are some combination of mix and matching that we would not advise on. So perhaps we may not take the risk on saying yes to, because we don't believe that those mixing and matching it's conducive to the best quality and the best work at the price that we suggest is the right one as well. But from a scaling perspective, we get a problem. So we love to work on problems. So we get a problem. And then we understand how we could be solving it with the client's team, depending on which one are their other suppliers, perhaps on the roster or their internal teams. And then what we do, we have two sets of team. One which is nearshoring, which it's roughly a couple of hubs, over 2,000 people, and we've been working with them for over 15 years. So it's not like it's a very close relationship. They come to our company meetings on a monthly basis, so I often see those faces on the screens. Yeah. They're very close. It's not at all a supplier-vendor relationship in any way, but they're part of the team. And we also got offshoring teams, which we tend to use more rarely, just to be able to be competitive when what we need to implement is relatively standard.
Okay.
So we have a preference of using nearshoring if the delivery is a little bit more complex, a little bit more articulated in terms of what kind of digital experience the client needs grafted.
You had mentioned you'd stopped white labeling for Accenture. What drove that reason?
I would like to keep my fame and my margins for myself, please.
Okay, well said. And coming about GTM, which you had mentioned, right? You said launches fail because products aren't designed with GTM in mind. What's a fix or what's the solution there?
Yes, I think there are things that can be fixed and things that cannot be fixed. Like there's a very good analogy that comes from FMCG as a sector. I had this feedback, we're talking about 10, 15 years ago. So I had this recurrent feedback from FMCG top practitioners about the way they struggled with pilots that were informed by solid data and performed quite well at pilot stage, but by the time they reached the shelves of their retailers, they weren't performing. at all as good as they were hoping for. So I started really getting interested into the why and how and what could have been done to do things slightly different and to de-risk that experience of innovation and new product development. And what I've realized is there are two factors that are part of why this often can be the case. The first one, forgive my French, but it's the shitification of the manufacturing process. So it's horrid to say, please censor me.
No, we don't censor on this one.
Aye. Okay. Often, not always, but there are lots of consideration that comes to play throughout the manufacturing life cycle at scale. So materiality, what you can use, what you cannot use. So even if you wanted to develop something with those material in this shape, in this form, the colors changed significantly. The materiality is not quite there because of the reality of some of the limitations that manufacturing at scale presents. So on that one, we couldn't do much about unless it was be very, very, very aware of some of the drivers that would come in place at force further down the line and trying to involve the people that are having to make those things work with what they have earlier on in the process. But the second one, actually, we thought that it was very much avoidable as a pitfall, which was the getting the insights and the collaboration from the retailer in order to really co-create and make better through a different set of insights your product pilot. And I think this is true across the board. If you know which channel you want to launch with, specifically if you're not going direct to consumer, there'd be all set of different insights and all sets of expertise that you could borrow from your retailer or your distributors or your agents or your brokers or your dealers. And then also like kind of build up the relationship earlier on so that they'll be much more inclined to perhaps give you a slightly better shelf space or a little better memory into their memory bank when they got the choice of selling you versus perhaps a competitor. So it builds and fosters relationships as well as creating a much more relevant set of data, fishing from the retailer environments or the B2B environments. That again gives you a lot of very interesting inputs to shape the product so that he has a better chance to succeed when he goes out in his first pilot form.
Okay, fantastic. And talk to me, how do you coach clients to create a lovable MVP that actually converts?
Beg your pardon, Simek, you said, how do I coach them to
create a lovable MVP that actually converts?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, well, from a planning perspective, you need to have a very strong CVP that works on two levels. It has to work on the customer level, so and what customer love to do and use, and from a business level, is it going to make me money and how? Because if you got one that works for one and not the other, it's equally disastrous. So if you go for something that customer absolutely adore and love, yeah, it's costing the business money rather than adding anything to the bottom line. Obviously not sustainable, not viable from an ROI perspective. But equally, you could come up with an idea that could make you tons of money, but nobody wants to use in its current form. It won't go anywhere. It won't add the traction either. Yep. So I think what the difference is between an MVP and an MLP, a minimum lovable product, in my personal experience, it's the right craft and diversity of the teams that you put on that first conception of what the minimum lovable product could be about. I think the reason why I love digital products so much as a discipline, possibly arguably even a little bit more than branding. I think in branding, you could have incredible outputs created by the same type of people. You could have like 2 or 3 of the same in a room and they could create something outstanding and fantastic. Digital product development is not like that. If you have a product that has been solely ideated and crafted by primarily technical talent, it will show up and feel and be perceived in a certain way. Equally, if the product has been crafted and curated primarily by marketing people, and sooner or later you will find that there is something missing. And I think digital product development is the only that if you want to reach outstandingness, so love in its users and stuff, it forces you to be diverse and inclusive. So I haven't seen an outstanding, fantastic business or set of product where the people were all the same or with the same level of skill set, expertise, neurodiversities. I haven't seen that. The best teams or the best products are crafted by diverse set of skill set being forced together to reach a level of excellence that ticks a lot of boxes on a lot of metrics.
Okay, so you really need to have the right mix of people to actually get that out there. If I had to ask you, I think what's one mistake you see again and again in corporate innovation?
One
Mistake. Yes.
One mistake that I see over and over again in innovation. I think first of all, it's the use of the word innovation.
Okay. So
I
that's
think
my mistake there. Okay.
well, it's a mistake in some
Mhm.
instances because it gets pigeonholed into a set of expectations that aren't just that. You could come up with something incredibly innovative, which is down to business process and efficiencies or operational excellence. So I think there is this very interesting way of having the innovation team sitting in some areas that perhaps are delivering something that is perceived innovative, but not giving enough kudos, enough credit to other teams that perhaps are finding different ways of innovate that perhaps get underfunded or under recognized or under scared. So I think like maybe going back to your original question, the first mistake is the way of innovation sometimes not getting fostered as a culture within the organization, but being perhaps pigeonholed into a function that sometimes delivers and sometimes doesn't deliver. The second bit in innovation, I see innovation like, unfortunately, in my experience, falling into two very diverse set of counter behaviors in organization. The one that go like build fast, fail fast.
Mm.
And to be honest with you, Simak, it just does my head in a little bit. I mean, and look, I'm coming from somebody that built a couple of startups myself. I had in my previous job, I was part of a big venture studio, but I think there are so many failure fast that could have been avoided just by a little better planning and a little better checking on the data. The other side is analysis paralysis. So I see those innovation think tank that becomes those massive costs and those massive expenses, arguably, in my view, a little bit overcooked or over using huge amount of data that I argue would have been needed before you actually had the chance to take a step forward and give it a try. And they often belong to organization where there is a culture of having to very hard defend what you're going for or not and feeling the pressure of having to justify your decision making process. So I guess like my tip or the big mistake, I say organization don't go for either or, like try to find an happy medium in between, which it doesn't bring you analysis paralysis, but doesn't also completely justify, throwing away lots of stuff really fast because that's the way it should be.
That's very good advice out there. And in terms of innovation, what's your kind of what you've seen and what's your go-to recommendation? Do big corporations need to have, or companies need to have a full-fledged innovation department, a function, or it should be like a horizontal across every department?
Again, it's interesting because I had a very similar question asked by somebody else not that long ago, and it very much depends on the organization. I know it
Right.
seems like a way for me to avoid a question, but it kind of isn't. Wholeheartedly recommended slightly different structure, significantly different structure actually, to slightly different setups and slightly different set of organization. Meaning, are you coming from being product-led or customer-led? Are you a global organization? Are you primarily dealing with a very important key market that provides 90% of your turnover? It depends from a lot of factors. I would say, regardless you do it horizontally or in a very well-defined department, innovation needs its champions. And also those champions needs to release the babies when those babies needs to be scaled and
Right.
consistently stabilized, because very often the person that drives innovation wouldn't be the same person, arguably, that it would be the best fitted set of hands to see that, to scale it and to see it growing.
Understood. And let's come to moderation, right? You're known as a world-class moderator. What makes a great panel?
With the people. What makes a great panel is the people, of course.
Tell me more about these people.
Of course, no more or less. I guess like the reason why I found myself enjoying moderation so much is because I used to work in events management, but I forgot because it was so long ago. Literally, I did it between 16. I was underage till about 24, 25, and I was taking a lot of things for granted because I was on the other side. So I think like first thing, it's not making the most of the time of the organizers. So in most events, most panels, you don't quite have the final lineup till 2-3 weeks, maybe 4 before the event. So it's a little bit pointless trying to pin down stories or trying to create synergies between panelists too much ahead of time because they would not have the final lineup. And now what I try to do 3 things. I always say to my panelists 3 things. So one, be you. Beside your job title, I think everybody can see the job title or the name of a company on a screen. That's absolutely fine. But I think what's much more interesting to people is the human behind it. So the real added value is the energy and the all the biases, good and bad, that the person can bring, their perspective, and to make it very, very tangible for the audience. So I always said, think about what's in it for me being the audience. Those people need to either learn something or have a memorable thing that's stuck with them as, oh, it was really interesting. It was really worth it for me to attend that panel because that panel was useful. So I guess what I'm into the usefulness and fun game. And I guess it's fun because the more people are having fun and having a great time, the more they're relaxed and the more the best version of them comes out. And I guess like with anything in moderation, I tend to have a bit of a catch up with all the panelists beforehand to get a sense about them as humans, as people, and to create a conversation arc that it's engaging and easy for the audience to fall through, but also glorifies and put the highlights on the best part of their work or how they can really come across at the best that they can, and again give something useful.
No, that's very good feedback. And talk to me, what's your dream event or guest you love to moderate for?
I'm pretty looking forward moderating possibly the Web Summit, which could be fun. I probably would love to be a judge at the CNET Awards.
Listen, you also mentioned you're considering a PhD, right, on experience design and intuition. What sparked that idea?
It's funny because I was on a holiday in Kenya this summer, and I read this book that I categorically do not advise anybody who is listening to this podcast to pick up if you don't want to change anything about your life. So if you want to stay exactly where you are and you are happy about operating in your zone of excellence and doing really well, do not read this book. So I had it for a year and I didn't read it, in fact, because I wasn't ready for it. And then I read it in August and I was like, I want to learn again. It's called The Big Leap by Guy Hendricks.
Okay.
Yeah, Big Leap. If you haven't read it, definitely worth considering. But it was the catalyst of me thinking, how can I learn at speed? And how can I do it in a structured way so that I can't get away from it? And how can I do it in a way that is not conflictual with my job that I love? And the PhD seemed like a very good formula to try to keep on learning and writing, because I do love to write, in a way that was scheduled and kind of organized, and to give me that structure to perhaps keep on furthering my curiosity, keep on feeding my curiosity. And then the next step became, what do I do? Do I do something? Obviously, I love my job, so there's been an element of I want to bring my job to the front, but I want to do something a little bit broader to some extent and authentic to me. And I had a couple of colleagues, one that I rate incredibly well, which is now the global creative director of Dr. Martens, saying to me that my intuition apparently is second to none. And I got invited to have an intuition class as a guest lecturer in a university here in London, international university here in London. And I've learned so much about the topic. I realized that I had enough material, CMAC, to write 6 months worth of training courses at all level. And I got something like 6 books that I'm reading over the Christmas holidays, in holiday with me in Thailand in October, because it's such a rich field. There is a lot of hardcore logic and data. And yes, and methodologies, tricks, you can actually learn to actually become a better decision maker through intuition and by listening to your guts and listening to a lot of other signals. So I became incredibly passionate about the area, and I thought, why not? But it's very much, it's not done yet. I think like this intuition meets experience design, or intuition meets branding.
Love it. And who will you target once you're done? Who will be your ideal customer on this one?
Exactly my customers today. I would categorically love to bring more structured intuition training to organization to build better experiences, to be able to take risk in a more controlled way, fishing and using form of data that aren't necessarily just the classic type of data that we used to, and also like training artificial intelligence better. And I guess the advent of artificial intelligence, given the empathy, as we know, is gone to the machines, as you know, that probably better than me, like customer services, sales team are being replaced by artificial intelligence, but they are performing much better. Perhaps intuition may be the ultimate human frontier, because I mean, artificial intelligence is fantastic at probability, but it's arguably less so imagination. So I think it could be a very nice way of looking at reality and fast decision making in a way that used all of our senses and all of our abilities, not just the mathematical, analytical, and logical or data ones.
Got it. And anyone wants to partner in any of your ventures, what should they know first?
Come with an open mind. And just bring your issue with us in the most authentic way that you can, because you get the most out of us. And we have a tendency to work with nice people.
And talk to me about it. What do you say, top 3 values that qualities that have made you successful today where you are? Well,
Successful. I guess I'm constantly
learning.
100% learning, and I'm very self-critical, maybe a little bit too much, and I'm constantly striving to improve myself. So I think maybe the striving to improve myself element for sure. The second one, listening skills. Genuine listening skills are embedded in my thirst for knowledge and curiosity. So I couldn't be as curious as I am if I didn't learn how to listen carefully to what gets said, and most importantly to what doesn't get said, which probably also kind of goes back to the third bit. Maybe it's intuition. So I've been told
Okay.
over and over and over that I'm an incredibly intuitive person. I thought it was a little bit vague and a little bit naff, and I was like, what is this intuition about? And now I started doing so much research over the last couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks only, but there is such a depth of frameworks and logical data and explanation that actually now feels much more concrete. I'll be like, oh yes, I take it then. It's a compliment. It's not something big enough. And I'm really thankful to my intuition, because I think it got me to make the right choices at the right time. And equally, other times, not quite so. But it's been a very good pointer to what good next could have been like for me.
Love it. I like the first one you mentioned also, which is always learning, right? Always being curious and learning. I think if someone has those kind of values, well, you are always expanding yourself. Thank you very much for being on the pod. It's a wrap for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.